Hello friends, my name is Rajkumar Jain. Hello, hello. Okay, so let's start with the AWS DevOps overview. So to guys, myself Rajkumar Jain. So let's start. I am a C Sharp Corner MVP. I am a AWS community builder. I am a solution architect. So in my previous session, I have explained the AWS DevOps, where I have explained you the main core of the DevOps. DevOps is nothing but a culture by most of the industry adopted to automate their process and reduce their go live time. So this is like, so if you want to understand what is DevOps, what are the benefits of DevOps, how to adopt those kind of culture in your industry, so just please go to see my previous video in my YouTube channel. It's a DevOps Cloud Engineer. You will get all the details there. So let's start with the lecture. So today I will cover the AWS DevOps part, where I will cover the first, like the basic or main services provided by the AWS. So for example, now as a developer, you want to develop your code, you want to build your code and test it, and before going to the like the live, you want to test it. If something is happening, then revert back to the your user or developer. So for that, AWS provided the four main streams, four main services, which is called AWS CodeCommit for your code repository. Then it provides the AWS CodeBuild. With the help of that, we will build our code and test it. Then AWS CodeDeploy. With the help of this service, we will deploy our code to the different environment. Or if it is all, if it is a, like if you want to deploy in a container side, so you use the AWS ECR. If you want to deploy in any EC2 machine, you can deploy there. So you have to just, like, you have to configure it in a proper manner, then you can deploy your code. And top of it, we have to build one pipeline. In this pipeline, we will collect all these three services. With the help of that, we will automate our process. So that code pipeline will cover the code commit part, AWS code build part, and the deployment part. So let's begin and understand how the AWS DevOps work. So as I said, like these are the main four pillar, where the AWS code pipeline, AWS code commit, and AWS code build deploy will help the DevOps engineer to create a pipeline from the AWS code repository, build with the help of the YAML file, where you have con- define all these steps. On the basis of that, it will build your code, it will test your code, and then if something is happening, if it everything is fine, then you can push your code for the deployment. So you will push your code to the S3 bucket. In the S3 bucket, then you will push to the code to the deployment process. So let's discuss each and every service in a detailed manner. So first we will discuss the AWS code pipeline. So in the AWS code pipeline, it's just like a similar to the Jenkins pipeline, where we will define our repository details. We will give the credential for our repository to download the source code in the Jenkins workspace. Then build the process, and then give the action items to in the form of a script, and then on the basis of that script, it will build your code. So that is how we will do in the Jenkins pipeline, or we can say the other DevOps tool. by which we will create a pipeline. So in the AWS code pipeline, typically we will fetch the code from the source code repository. Here the source code repository is referred to the AWS CodeCommit, where we have our source code repository, or we can also configure our GitHub repository there. Then for the build service, we will use the AWS CodeBuild. For deployment, as we said, like we will use the AWS CodeDeploy. We'll configure in the inside the pipeline, and we'll deploy our code. So during all this process, we are referring to different environment, and in each process we can implement and we can perform the approval process. So if everything is going fine, then it will allow us, and then our like the peer review will be done, and then he will approve the pipeline, and on the basis of that we can move ahead. So every steps we can add our approval process if required. So this is how the code pipeline is. So now let's discuss about the like how we can configure it. So if you can see here in the source code repository, first of all in the code pipeline we have to define our source code repository. In the source code repository we will we will see that what kind of action categories are available, then what kind of, we can say, the source providers are there. So either it's a AWS CodeCommit, or it's a GitHub repository, or it's a bit bucket. So whatever is available we will use it as per our code repository. Then move to the once it is configured, the first source part is configured, and then we'll see our repository name, and we configure the branch. Either it's a master branch or feature branch, we want to build it. And once it is done, then we will go to the next steps where we will configure our pipeline. So here we want to build it with the help of Maven. It means our code is written in the Spring Boot or in the Java side, and with the help of that Maven we will build our Java code. Then once the code is built, and we can add the test steps also inside the YAML, and that will perform. And then we will configure where this code should be deploy, or we can say the keep our code, the build code executable file, where we want to keep it. So we will keep all this code into our storage one, from where we will fetch the code and deploy it in the whatever the environment we want to deploy it. Once our execution got complete, it means our code pipeline got executed completely and successfully, all these windows will show as a green. If something is wrong happening, it will showing as a red one. And here in our script itself, you can configure or we can write a command steps to perform if something is going wrong, what kind of step we need to follow. So for example, if your code executed and it is not successfully built, then you will write you can use the AWS SNS to send a notification to the developer, and he will get the notify with the your code is not built successfully. You have to perform this kind of actions there. If your code got successfully executed, then your deployment manager will see, and he will see all the artifacts, and on the basis of that, it will approve the code for the deployment purpose. So this kind of configuration we can perform in the YAML itself. So next, now we can we are aware about the code pipeline, how we can configure, what are the steps we should follow. Now we will discuss in the detail how the AWS CodeCommit will work. So first of all, what is AWS CodeCommit? So it's just nothing but it's just like a code repository. It's our source control source code management tool, where we will push our code in as like a version control service. It is just like a same again. It is built on the top of the Git again. So whatever the action we need to perform in the Git side, the same action, same kind of command we will perform here to pull the code, to clone the code, to create the branch and all. We are using the same Git command. So this is our online version control service tool provided by the AWS, just like our Git repository. Here, team need not to maintain the version control because by default, AWS CodeCommit manages those version control. And once your source code are in the binaries are generated out of the build, we will push the code or we can keep into the our storage. With AWS CodeCommit, we can create a repository and every developer can work and clone those repository. They can create their own branch. They can push the branch also. Once their work is finishes, they can push their branch. They can create a request to merge that branch into the specific branch, or we can say the master branch. If something is conflict there, we can visualize the conflict in our AWS code commit repository itself, and we can resolve the conflict also there, and we can merge the code. So this is what the code commit uh, features by which we can easily manage or maintain our code into the code commit repository. And it is uses all the standard git commands, as I said, and we can perform all the git command activities here also. But uh, instead of doing the CLI part, we are using the user interface where we can perform this merge conflict and resolve the conflict, merging the repository from one branch to another branch, create a new branch. So all this UI is already available in AWS Commit, and we can use it instead of going to write a command line code into the CLI. How AWS Code Commit you can use it? So let's first of all we will create an empty repository and edge one page there. So what we can do, go to the AWS Code Commit, create a one repository with your name, whatever name you want, clone the URL, create a uh, create a clone in your local machine, add one file there in the repository and push it to the GitHub. Then your repository will get. So before, like once you are doing this kind of activity, when you are cloning the Git repository, it is required your login ID and password by which you will able to access to the your AWS repository, because without authenticated login ID details, you can't clone the repository. It's just like a private repository. Okay. So once you will perform all this activity, you will be able to clone the repository on your local machine. Then you can add one file, whatever it is. You can create, just for the understanding, you can just add one file there and push it. So once you will push it, it will show in your code commit repository, or the repository which you have created with all the file details. You can visualize those files, you can read those files, you can understand, you can merge, delete, and pull the request, whatever you want, you can do it. So it is available in your master branch. So this is what the code commit is working. Now, how the code build will work. So now your source code is available in your code commit repository. Now you have to implement the continuous integration, like CI part. So what continuous integration will do? It will continuously integrate your code into the repository. So once the code is available in your repository, we will fetch the latest code in the repository, or we can say that we are pushing the code into the repository, and then will start to build it. So for example, if you have a Python code, we will use the Py language or Py compiler to execute those code. If you have a Visual Studio, then you require the MS build to execute your .NET code. If you have a Java, then you are using the Maven or Gradle. With the help of that, you will execute your code. So that kind of specification details you have to uh, write in the YAML format and upload that specific YAML file into your code build service. It will get all the details. It will require your source code detail where it is belongs to. Once it will fetch it, it will keep into the local till the build repository, till the build. And then if you want to configure it for the testing purpose, you can also use the sonar cube, and you can configure the sonar cube to test your code. Once the build is successful, then you can configure what action should be performed. So all this action you will write down into the YAML file. So YAML, in like once you build your Java code, it will be a different format. You can build in the different format, either is the var or zip or jar or EAR. And once it is available and available in your S3 bucket or repository where you want to store it, then these files are available and you can execute it, or you can deploy this line of code if the build is successful. This is the sample YAML file where we have configured what action need to perform on your code repository source code. So here we want to perform to build it. So we are using the Maven clean install build. Then post build, what we want to do, the build will say like the build is completed in a particular date. We can add one more command here, like if build is got not successful, post build, if build is not successful, then create one SNS service and inform to the or notify to the developer like your code got unsuccessful or your build is not successfully. So you have to perform some actions there. If everything is going fine, you will collect those build artifact and push to the target S3 bucket, and S3 bucket will contain your jar or var or zip file. So this is what my sample file. We will upload it. So let's see in the next screen how we can configure it in the AWS code build. So in the AWS code build project, you will see the code build have a GitHub repository detail. We are giving the project name. The description, you can put your descriptions about your project. So in the current source code, you have to give the source code URL here, and then how to build it. So for that, your code is written in the Java, so you have to give the current image of Java and what action need to be performed. Then we will upload the build specific YAML file here, and with the help of that YAML file, it will perform the actions on your at the time of build. Everything is going fine, then you will put your image, or we can say the file which got built into the particular S3 bucket. So you have configured it here in the S3 bucket. So this is my type of service name, and this is my bucket name. Here you will see the build history. So how many times your build got executed, when it got executed, all the information you can see here in the build history. Okay, so I hope it is clear now. So this is how we are configuring our AWS code build. Next, so once your code build got success, you will see this such kind of screen where you will see your build got successfully. Your build ARN is this one. Here you can go and check your successful build details. This is your repository details on which it got executed. Build project name is this one, and what kind of action it got is performed on your build. It is and how much time it will take. Every details are available here. Correct? Okay. So now let's move to the next slide. So in the next slide, once your build got successful, you can go and verify in your S3 bucket which you have configured in the AWS code build, and you will see your var file are available in the S3 bucket. Now, so we have covered AWS CodePipeline, we have covered AWS CodeCommit, we have covered the AWS CodeBuild. Now the final step of this, which is the AWS CodeDeploy. So in the AWS CodeDeploy, as the name suggests, we need to deploy our executable code and deploy into the next environment either it's a dev, SIT, whatever it is, we will deploy our code there with the configuration again. So here, like what we can do, if we want to create a container, then we will create a Docker file where we will create the image of our file and create a container and push that code to the ECR. If you want to push our application in a particular EC2 machine, then no need to do anything. You have to just copy your executable files and push to the server. The For example, the Apache Tomcat. If you have a web application, just deploy your executable web application to the Tomcat server. So since now we have the artifacts with us in the S3 bucket, we picked from our artifacts from the S3 bucket, and we will push to the either is a Tomcat or the Jabo server in the EC2 machine where we want to deploy our line of code. So we have to create again one YAML file. With the help of that YAML file, what we will do, we will configure our deployment again. So let's see what we have to return there in the YAML file. So in the YAML file, we will explain and we will define my index.html file should be copied from the source, or we can say the repository, the storage repository, and deploy to the Apache server. So my source, we found our index.html file in this particular folder to deploy. My destination is on EC2 machine, which is based on the Linux one. So in that machine, we have to deploy our index.html file into this where www.html folder. Then here, before install, I want to perform some action. So it means in that action, what we will do, we will before we want to perform some action, who will run this action. So I like whoever the user has the proper permission or action, uh, as per the IAM, he only can perform the action. So here the user run is, so he can run that action in the code deploy. Then after the installation, my file is deployed into particular location, but how my server will know? So what I will do, I will restart my server. Restart my server, it means where my file is located. So if it is the Apache Tomcat or it's a JBoss, I will restart that. Okay. So now, before install, what I want to do, I want to remove the existing file available into the server. So using the sudo command, I will remove the index.html file, the existing file from the server. And so this is the before installation step. So what it will do, it will go to the EC2 machine in a particular folder and remove that file. Then sudo means super user can do. The super user do the activity. So he has almost all the rights to do the activity. He will remove that file. Now in the restart server script, I will restart my Apache server. So I will write down the command, the service httpd restart. So this is what the two script files are available in my script folder. So this is the example repository where I have an index.html file. I have a scripts to execute it. I have a YAML file to upload it and to configure my deployment. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. So once my deployment got executed successfully, it will be shown here in the window. You can see it will show. You can go and see the view instances. Revision location you can see here in the code deployment. Whatever the activities are performed, you can see each one. You can see the log also. So till now, you can see we deployed our application successfully, right? View instance, when you will create the view instance, you will see the HTML fields directly. So my AWS DevOps is completed here, but AWS DevOps is a very flexible tool or service by which we can integrate with the different DevOps tools also. So in the next slide, we will try to understand how we can integrate our AWS DevOps pipeline with the help of Jenkins. So let's see Jenkins integration with the AWS services. So nowadays, like teams are using Jenkins as much as, because Jenkins is a kind of tool which are free of cost. The enterprise version is also available, but the most of the enterprises are using the most of the companies are using the Jenkins free of cost tool, the free source, or we can say the open source. So for CI integration or CD part, we Jenkins is the rich one where we can install the plugins, and with the help of those plugins, we can perform CI/CD both in the same tool or same application. So they would not really like to move away from it, but rather than integrate with the AWS services, which we already discussed. So while there are certain procedures involved, so that procedure I want to explain here with the help of a screenshot. In future, I will try to create some scenario also. The lab session I will take, but right now I will, with the help of a screenshot, I will try to explain you how we can integrate Jenkins with the AWS service. So let's go to the Jenkins UI first. In the Jenkins UI, in the source code management tab, you have to give the your code repository URL. So here you can see the code repository URL have the git dash code commit AP. It code commit, it means it belongs to AWS code commit. So here we have a AWS code commit repository here. We have passed the credential here. We can configure our credential in somewhere in the Jenkins itself. Jenkins also have such kind of plugins where we can keep our credential and just configure it here. So no need to give the all the details here. You can copy somewhere else and refer those credential here. So now my code AWS code commit service is configured. Then in the integration of the AWS code build, again in the with the help of plugins, once we have installed that plugins, we will see the AWS code build here, and we can configure it in the same way. Here we have to pass the AWS access key and the secret key, which we have as a user. You have to go in the IAM service and get these details from there and pass it here in the as a access key and the secret key. You have to give the project name details, project information which we have seen in the AWS code at the time of AWS code build. Give the project detail here and then configure it in the AWS code build side. Once it is done, because everything is there, we already configured our action items in the code build side. Now we can deploy our AWS CodeDeploy in the Jenkins integration. Again, the plugins is there. So in the post build action, we will give all the details of the code deploy. And again, we have to pass the secret key and the access key for the same, because it's again a different service. So we have to configure it again. And I said not required to configure it again. We have to configure in somewhere in a hidden format and just refer the details here. So it will not ask you again and again. So here in the code deployment, if you can see the code deployment application name, where you want to deploy staging, and the configuration of the detail, and the S3 bucket name. So all these prefix post build is required to configure here. When it is done, your integration part is done till the deployment. So all the part you have done here, and this is how we can integrate our Jenkins also with the within the with the AWS DevOps. So in the AWS DevOps, we already covered the basic services, AWS code pipeline, code commit, code build, and the code deploy. Here we also covered the Jenkins integration with the AWS. So I hope you enjoyed these sessions. I hope you got all the basic requirement, basic information of the AWS DevOps. In future, I will try to create some lab sessions also, where we will create a basic pipelines and try to automate our build within a second till production, or we can say the like whatever the our environments are available. If it is a web application, I will try to show you within a second your code will be reflected in your web URL. So thank you guys, thanks for attending these sessions. I hope you enjoy this session. You can subscribe my YouTube channel and you can connect me by any way. This is my email ID. You can see my LinkedIn URL also. This is my YouTube channel details. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Thanks to the C Sharp Corner Indore chapter team, and thanks to join this session. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Have a nice day.